All right, let's get right into it. For years now, we've all been hearing the buzz about the therapeutic potential of psychedelics, but there's this one huge puzzle that's been bugging scientists. We have this whole range of really different drugs, LSD, ketamine, you name it, and they're all showing this incredible promise for treating the same tough conditions, things like PTSD, depression, and addiction. So how on earth is that possible?
And that right there is the million-dollar question. It's what's driving some of the most fascinating neuroscience happening today. I mean, on the surface, these drugs couldn't be more different in how they work in the brain. So how do they all lead to such a similar and potentially healing place? Well, that's the mystery we are going to unravel right now. Just look at how different these substances are. You've got your classic hallucinogens, right? LSD, psilocybin, the stuff that changes your perception. Then there are empathogens like MDMA, known for making you feel deeply connected to others. You've got dissociatives like ketamine, which can make you feel detached from reality, and even oneirogens like ibogaine, which create these intense dreamlike states. They all work differently, they feel totally different, but somehow they all point to this shared therapeutic potential. It's a real scientific whodunit.
Okay, so to find our first clue, we actually have to take a step back from psychedelics for just a second. We need to look at this really core concept from developmental neuroscience. I want you to think of it like we're finding a bunch of locked doors inside the adult brain.
These locked doors are what scientists call critical periods. Think about it. They're these special windows of time, mostly when we're kids, where our brains are like super sponges, just incredibly plastic and ready to learn specific skills. It's how a baby effortlessly picks up language, or how a child learns the ins and outs of socializing. But the long-held belief has always been that once you hit adulthood, those windows slam shut, the doors are locked, the brain just isn't that flexible anymore. So here's where the story starts to get really juicy. A few years back, researchers had this huge breakthrough. They discovered that MDMA could actually pick the lock on one of those doors. Specifically, it could reopen the critical period for social reward learning in adult mice. It basically made their brains flexible again, open to new social learning, just like when they were young. Now, that discovery was absolutely massive, but it opened up an even bigger question. I mean, MDMA is an empathogen, so it kind of makes sense it would mess with social learning, right? But what about all those other psychedelics? The weird ones, the different ones? Could they unlock the very same door? Well, a team of researchers at Johns Hopkins decided to find out. First on the list, psilocybin, from magic mushrooms. And boom, the results were crystal clear. You can see it right here. The adult mice that got psilocybin showed a major reopening of that social learning window. They started valuing social interaction again. The control group? Nothing. For them, the door stayed shut. Okay, so next up, they tried LSD, another classic psychedelic. And guess what? The result was exactly the same. A huge reopening of that critical period. You can see a pattern starting to form here, right? This wasn't just some weird one-off thing with MDMA. Now, this is where my mind was kind of blown. They tested ketamine. Ketamine is a dissociative. It works through a completely different system in the brain. And you're not going to believe it, it also unlocked the door. This was a massive clue. It meant the mechanism wasn't about one specific type of drug action. Something else was going on. And finally, just to really hammer the point home, they tested ibogaine, a super potent, long-lasting one-erotogen. And, yep, same story. It also reopened that critical period for social reward learning. It was consistent right across the board. And this just perfectly sums up the first huge piece of our puzzle. The ability to reopen this critical period isn't some quirk of one drug. No, it's a shared, unifying property across this whole incredibly diverse class of substances. This is our first common thread. The research also uncovered another absolutely fascinating clue. So the team measured how long this open state actually lasted in the mice. For ketamine, that window was open for less than 2 days. For psilocybin and MDMA, about 2 weeks. LSD kept it open for around 3 weeks. And ibogaine? Over a month. Now here's the kicker. That duration in mice lines up almost perfectly with how long the subjective trip lasts in humans. That's a huge hint that the experience itself is tied to this window of brain plasticity. Okay, so we know they all open the same door, and we know they keep it open for different lengths of time that mirror the human experience. But that still leaves the biggest question of all. How? What's the common biological switch they're all flipping? The hunt for the master key was officially on. This became the next burning question. I mean, if they all produce the same effect, even though they start in different places, they have to meet up somewhere down the line, right? There has to be some single downstream pathway, a master key mechanism that explains this shared superpower.
So the most obvious suspect was the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor. That's the main target for your classic hallucinogens. And yeah, for sure, if you block that receptor, LSD and psilocybin just stop working. But, and this is a big but, MDMA and ketamine still worked. They didn't need that receptor at all to open the critical period. So 5-HT2A is definitely a key, but it's not the master key. The real answer had to be somewhere deeper.
To find that answer, the researchers had to look past the surface of the brain cells. They had to investigate the very structure of the brain's environment itself, what you could call its physical scaffolding.
And this is what they found. In their huge 2023 paper in the journal Nature, the team concluded that the common mechanism was the reorganization of the extracellular matrix. Okay, so what in the world does that mean?
Let's break that down because extracellular matrix is a mouthful. The ECM is basically this dense web of proteins that fills the space between your brain cells. The best way to think of it is like the mortar between the bricks in a wall. It gives the brain its physical structure, sure, but it also helps lock all the brain circuits into place, which is what makes the adult brain so rigid.
So here it is. This is the master key. All of these completely different drugs, through their own unique starting points, end up triggering the exact same set of instructions deep inside the cell. And those instructions lead to a temporary loosening and remodeling of this ECM scaffolding. By dissolving some of that mortar, the brain's whole environment becomes more fluid, more malleable, and that's what allows the critical period to reopen.
So what does finding this master key actually mean? It's not just a cool science fact. The implications here for medicine and for how we understand the brain are, well, they're profound.
So here's the whole story, laid out in 5 steps. 1. Different psychedelics hit their own unique targets. 2. All those different signals eventually meet up at a common pathway. 3. This pathway changes which genes are turned on or off. 4. Those genes create proteins that go out and remodel that extracellular matrix, the brain's scaffolding. And 5. That remodeling reopens a critical period, making the brain flexible and ready for change.
So why should you care? Well, first, this gives us a real physical reason for that psychological flexibility everyone talks about in psychedelic therapy. Second, because we're talking about physically changing the brain's structure, it helps explain why the benefits can show up so fast and last so long. And this is really important. It shows how different these are from addictive drugs. Addictive drugs can cause a messy, out-of-control brain state. Psychedelics, on the other hand, seem to trigger a much more controlled therapeutic state. They don't just make the brain plastic, they enhance its ability to manage that plasticity.
And you know, this discovery is really just the beginning. This study focused on a social learning critical period, but there are others, for motor skills, for our senses, and more. And that leaves us with this incredible, mind-expanding question. If psychedelics really are a master key for reopening these critical periods, what other locked doors in the brain are we about to open? Could we use this to treat not just mental health, but things like stroke, maybe even some forms of autism or blindness? We found the key, now we just have to find all the locks.